The MotoGP season has its own way of reshaping narratives around a rider. No reputation is ever truly secure, no status immune to the test of time. Francesco Bagnaia is perhaps the clearest illustration of that reality. In recent years, he had been positioned as the face of Ducati's newfound stability, the embodiment of a long-term project finally bearing a fruit in Bologna. Yet as his career enters a new phase, particularly after a season that failed to meet expectations, that status is once again being questioned. And it is precisely at this moment that Ducati made a statement which caught the paddock's attention. They are anticipating the return of the 2024 version of Francesco Bagnaia in the 2026 MotoGP season. On the surface, the statement sounds simple enough, but within the pressure cooker environment of modern MotoGP, where technical detail, marginal gains, and psychological warfare coexist, it carries far greater weight. Ducati are not speaking in terms of nostalgia, they are not longing for the past. What they are expressing is a belief that a rider's performance does not always follow a linear path, that a setback is not necessarily an ending, but part of a cycle that can be harnessed for resurgence. To understand Ducati's confidence, we must revisit 2024. That season represented what many saw as the most complete version of Bagnaia. He was not only fast, but composed, not merely consistent, but intelligent in how he read races. He understood the limits of the bike, knew when to push and when to settle for points. There was a clear harmony between rider and machine. His relationship with the Desmosedici felt natural, almost intuitive. For many observers, 2024 marked the moment when Bagnaia truly reached full maturity as a MotoGP rider. But MotoGP never stands still. Technical evolution, regulatory nuances, and internal team dynamics ensure that what works one year may no longer apply the next. As the sport moved forward, Bagnaia encountered challenges that were difficult to predict. Adapting to a new technical package did not come as smoothly as before. The confidence that had long underpinned his performances began to waver. At the same time, Marc Márquez's arrival within the Ducati structure introduced a different kind of pressure, not imposed by the team, but psychological. Sharing a garage with an 8-time world champion who immediately looked competitive inevitably changes the internal balance. In that context, the narrative surrounding Bagnaia began to shift. From being the centerpiece of Ducati's project, he was increasingly portrayed as a rider who needed to prove himself once more. In MotoGP, such shifts in narrative can be more damaging than any technical issue. When confidence erodes, not just internally but among the media and the public, a rider can find themselves in an extremely vulnerable position. This is why Ducati's message matters. When Davide Tardosi states that he is convinced Bagnaia will return to his best version in 2026, it is not simply an expression of moral support. It is a strategic signal. Ducati are effectively saying that they understand what has happened, and crucially, that they do not interpret a difficult season as evidence of permanent decline. Notably, Tardosi is not promising radical upgrades or a technical revolution. There is no talk of a completely new motorcycle. Instead, the emphasis is placed on something far harder to quantify: the mental process of a rider. Ducati believe that what Bagnaia has experienced during this challenging period will ultimately make him stronger, that confusion, frustration, and even failure are integral to the reforging of a champion. This approach is particularly striking in today's data-driven MotoGP landscape. While rival manufacturers speak at length about aerodynamics, whole-shot devices, and tire management, Ducati are focusing on psychological readiness and experiential processing. They recognize that under relatively stable regulations leading into 2026, the decisive differences may no longer come from the machine itself, but from who is able to extract the maximum from a broadly comparable package. It is worth remembering that current MotoGP regulations severely limit the scope for dramatic innovation. As a result, manufacturers are operating within a fairly level technical framework. In such conditions, competitive advantage often lies in the smallest of margins, and one of the most significant margins remains the relationship between rider and bike. When a rider truly trusts their machine, they are prepared to take calculated risks. Without that trust, they are always half a step behind. The idea of the 2024 version of Bagnaia does not mean a literal return to old specifications. Rather, it is about restoring a sense of control, comfort, and belief, the qualities that defined him during that period. History shows that many great MotoGP riders have gone through similar phases. They do not lose their talent, they lose the connection. And when that connection is reestablished, performance often follows. There is also an internal team dimension that cannot be ignored. Ducati are currently operating from a position of strength. They possess the most competitive motorcycle, a robust technical structure, and riders of world champion caliber. With Marquez delivering strong performances, Ducati are under no immediate pressure to rescue a season. On the contrary, they can afford to be patient. That patience allows them to give Bagnaia the space to rebuild himself without excessive pressure. Contractual stability reinforces this approach. Both Bagnaia and Marquez are signed through to 2026. There is no urgency to make long-term decisions now. Ducati do not need to act out of panic. Instead, they can treat 2026 as a genuine evaluation year, a season in which Bagnaia is expected to return to his best form and where internal hierarchy can emerge organically based on results on track. Should Ducati's plan unfold as intended, the implications would be significant. Imagine a Ducati team entering 2026 with two riders operating at peak performance. That scenario would pose a serious threat, not only to rivals such as Aprilia, KTM, and Yamaha, but would also create an intensely competitive internal environment. When managed correctly, such internal rivalry often acts as a catalyst for extraordinary performance. Of course, there are risks. MotoGP offers no guarantees that psychological rebuilding will proceed as hoped. Not every rider rebounds from a difficult season. Some become trapped in a downward spiral. This is precisely why 2026 will be a defining year for Bagnaia, not only for his standing within Ducati, but for his identity as an elite rider. The central question remains, does Ducati genuinely see concrete signs that Bagnaia is already on the right path? Or is this public confidence primarily a means of preserving internal stability? The truth likely lies somewhere in between. Ducati are a deeply rational manufacturer, but they also understand the power of narrative. By expressing belief openly, they send a message to Bagnaia himself, to their rivals, and to the wider public that the project remains intact. Ultimately, MotoGP has always been about more than outright speed. It is a sport defined by momentum, self-belief, and adaptability. If Francesco Bagnaia can truly rediscover his best version, not as a replica of the past, but as an evolution shaped by experience, then 2026 could mark the beginning of a compelling new chapter, not just for Ducati, but for the championship as a whole. And perhaps that is the essence of Ducati's statement. They are not promising victories. They are not guaranteeing titles. They are simply saying this: Francesco Bagnaia's story is not finished. The question now is not whether Ducati still believe in Bagnaia, but whether Bagnaia can prove that belief is justified. What do you think? Will we genuinely witness the return of the best version of Pecco in MotoGP 2026, or is this Ducati's final act of optimism before charting a new direction? Share your thoughts in the comments.